this was just the girls. They passed around an apple and they had them all take a bite of the apple, right? And by the end, they were like, each bite represented a partner, right? So each time that you bite an apple, that's the time that you had sex. And then by the time you get to the end, it's just that core, right? And they're like, and now look at this. Would anyone, he holds up the apple stem, would anyone want to marry this? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that happens?
What the fuck?
fuck?
Thank you for tuning in. We are Sex Positivity Unfiltered, and we are so excited for today's episode and to share with you. And we are going to talk about sex positivity and the impact on mental health and kind of just impact on who we are as a whole. So I can't wait to get into it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm excited. It's episode number 2, so it should be really good. So as far as the impacts of mental health and sex positivity, I know you have probably a lot of input, but just to bring it home back from episode 1, as far as sex positivity goes, the 4 major impacts that I've seen are A, emphasizes safe sex. It embraces differences in your sexual identity and your lifestyle. It encourages sexual pleasure and experimentation, and it advocates for comprehensive and truthful sex education. And then one thing that I wanted to bring up that it isn't like the 4 pillars that you see all the time, is that it's very much a feministic movement, right? So it's very much equal rights for everybody, including men, which was a big impact that a lot of people don't seem to really talk about very often.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everything you said is true. And when I think about this within my career and my role as a therapist, I think when we start to view sexuality as a healthy part of our development, I think that makes us healthier people as a whole. Because I have a lot of clients that might have a lot of anxiety, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and it can easily be rooted in this like suppression of who they are as a sexual person, whether it's being afraid to come out as sexual orientation, things that they like sexually, even being able to talk about sex if it's not been allowed, like that's really uncomfortable, and it can create this, block with their partner. And so, yeah, when I look at like sex positivity movement and everyone being allowed to just be who they are as an individual and show up authentically, especially in a sexual way, it very much correlates to being a healthy person overall and having improved mental health. So I think it very much matters. If there's any, like when I think about like professionals in my field, professionals who are really uncomfortable with sex or who are sex negative or who will not talk about that with clients, and that does happen. They might say like, yeah, I don't talk about that with clients.
Really?
Oh yeah, it happens. And it kind of says it's like this bad, dirty thing to talk about. And so we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
But then you're missing this whole part of who the person is. And when you have a client, I just think you have to look at clients holistically. Every part of them matters in the context of whatever brings them to your office. And so I think that's why I think this movement helps. It like matters in this context. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. One of the things whenever I was listening back to our last episode that really resonated with me was the fact that from the time we're being raised, we're basically, most of us, taught these very sex negative concepts where you don't talk about sex, it's shameful, you don't tell your period, you don't talk about your period in front of men, you don't even give your genitals the right names, you give them nicknames, hoo-ha or twat,
cookie,
or
like whatever,
whatever, flower, whatever it is, whatever you grew up with, which go ahead and in the comments, go ahead and tell me what you grew up calling your genitals. I really want to know. But yeah, so we're taught all of these things of like shame, repress, don't talk about, let's not do this. And then you become an adult to where those are now sex is something that you need to do in order to procreate. Because once there's like a line where you hit somewhere in your 20s where it stops becoming you shouldn't be having sex, and it becomes you should be focusing now on finding a partner, having sex, procreating, giving your
Mhm.
mother grandchildren, things like that. And it's so hard to do the switching
Yeah,
from it.
because it's not really a switch like people think it's gonna be.
Mhm.
And especially in the context of religion. I mean, we're in the South and religion is like in Texas, religion is very prominent,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people are religious. And there is that belief, like there's this taboo. And like I'll speak to like my clients. I ask pretty much all of them, what was the sex education you got? Was it talked about in the home? Usually answer is no education, wasn't talked about at home, learned about it from my friends or saw stuff online or saw magazines or whatever. The silence is very loud.
Yes.
When it's not talked about, the silence says, this is dirty. We don't discuss that in this house. You also shouldn't be doing it. Wait until you're married.
Yep.
So it's like shame, shame, shame. You get married and suddenly you can have sex now. And, it can go a few different ways. I mean, some people can't wait and maybe they get married too young.
Yes.
Because
Just
they
let's have it.
want to rush into it. They want to get married already. Like, I'm ready right out of high school. Let's get married. And that can work out. Sometimes it doesn't. But then it can go the other way where when you do get married and it's not a switch for you and sex is really kind of wrapped up in shame, that's when all the sexual anxiety really starts, because now you have this spouse that wants to have sex with you and sex for you is like, holy shit, this is terrifying. And I'm so uncomfortable that I don't want to do anything.
I can see
right.
that.
And so it's like when it's not talked about, I think people avoid uncomfortable topics because it's easier. It's like that instant relief. Like, oh, thank God we don't have to deal with that. You're going to have to deal with it eventually. And when you do, it is unfortunate if it's all wrapped up in shame.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that was very much the upbringing I was given. And don't get me wrong, my mother is very progressive for her upbringing and how she was taught. We weren't allowed to call our genitals any nicknames. Like we had to address it by the scientific terms. She showed us about diseases and pregnancy and all those things up front. I knew how procreation was how it happened as early as like 5 or 6. Like I knew the scientific parts of it. Never grew up around shame around that area. But once I hit like 13, for when boys came into the picture, then what I was being told, how I was being raised shifted very much so into a we don't talk about certain subjects around males. We don't share certain aspects of our personal life with other people, especially not your mother. Type thing. So yeah, no, that's very much a normal, common upbringing here, especially in the South. And I was very progressive. Most of my friends didn't get any type of sex talk, any type of sexual education. I was the heathen who was explaining everything to them in, 5th, 6th grade.
Yeah, kids are talking about it.
Yes.
Kids and teens are talking. Like, if you think your kid isn't, I promise you they are.
Yeah.
And so you might as well be the one talking to them. And there's always an age-appropriate way to do it.
Of course.
I'm not the expert on that. I don't have any kids. But there's always an age-appropriate way. Like, depending on how old they are, you can have a talk that is going to make sense for like where they are developmentally.
Yes.
That's going to help them. And I think like you mentioned, like when boys started coming into the picture, but you're married to a woman. And so I'm mentioning that because especially here, but in a lot of places, sex is when we do talk about sex, it's very heteronormative. It's like male, female, penis and vagina. That's what sex is.
Yeah. No way in hell would we have queer sex education here in Texas. No way in hell.
And it's unfortunate because we should be having that, but I can't even imagine that like in a million years, unfortunately. But I mention that because there is no representation for queer kids. Like even if you get sex education at school or at home and it's heteronormative, I would imagine if I'm like putting myself in, let's say, a queer teen's shoes, and I'm only interested in other girls, and the only thing I'm seeing is like penis and vagina, I would be wondering, well, what is sex for me? Like, where's the line? Like, where's the line between, like, and I'm gonna talk about like being a virgin. It's
yeah.
Well, am I still a virgin? Or like, what does that mean? I mean, I would just imagine that's really confusing. Virginity, I think the whole concept of virginity is bullshit. I'm just gonna say that right now. Like, I think I have a lot to say about that, but I'm using that language because it's what we hear.
Yes.
Like, are you still a virgin or not?
No, it's one of the main questions of high school is, your loss of your virginity.
Yeah, it's like
major,
something you lose or something you give away. And I just think, it's like the whole purity culture thing. And like teenagers will feel a lot of shame about that if what they've learned is don't have it until you're married and they quote unquote give in and have sex with another teenager because they want to. I've heard stories from clients where there's an immediate guilt after.
Oh, of course.
Like, it can feel good, and then as soon as it's over,
yes,
guilt, shame, doom.
Dirty, you shouldn't have done this.
I'm never gonna tell a soul.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I'm actually a little curious now that we're speaking about it.
Mm-hmm.
What was your sex education where you were, and what area did you grow up in?
I grew up in Texas, in South Texas, like near the Corpus area.
Okay.
No sex education at home. It was very much like, just don't do it.
Okay.
But I almost don't even remember my parents saying that. It was almost just kind of like a given, like, you're too young to be having. But when you're like 15 or 16, you're not too young. Like, my friends I started having sex when I was 16. And all my friends were having it before then.
Yeah.
So when there's like, oh, they're too young, I remember thinking like,
it's already happening. Sorry.
You have not been to school with me. We are not too young.
That's funny.
It's happening now.
What about in school? Did they sit you down?
In school, I have a specific memory. Like, I don't know why this stands out to me. No, actually, I know exactly why it stands out to me. I'm going to get real personal here for a second. So just anyone listening. The education I got, it was by the softball coach, who was a woman.
Okay.
She was very uncomfortable talking about sex. You could tell she did not want to be in that position of being like the sex ed teacher, but she just got thrown into it because, like, I guess
for some reason it's a gym teacher.
Yes.
It's always the health teacher, gym
it's the
teacher,
baseball
whatever.
Coach.
Yeah,
it's someone like sports athletic related.
What? How does that correlate? But okay.
I don't know. So it's softball coach, and she was given the education, and I think the education was like a reproductive video. It really wasn't education. It was kind of like, here's what reproduction is and here's what a period is. And like, that was pretty much it, right? So like, is that really sex ed or is that more reproduction ed? But something I remember her saying, and I don't know why she said this, maybe one of the kids in my class was like joking or something. And I remember her saying, I don't know why anyone would have sex while you're on your period. That's disgusting. I remember it because I was already having sex with my boyfriend at the time, and we had sex while I was on my period, and I liked it. So when she said that, I remember feeling like, oh my God, I can't tell anyone that because like I'm hearing from the teacher how disgusting that is. And like, she said it so confidently that I was like,
I guess that's not something we're supposed to do.
I'm never going to tell a soul. And I don't really care. I mean, now that I'm older, I don't know if I'm interested in having sex on my period. But like, I was 16 and I was just really curious. Yeah. And it was like this thing that I wasn't supposed to be doing, which made it way more fun to do. Because you're not supposed to. And so I was having sex all the time.
So did you not get sexual education until 16? Or was it provided before?
It was not provided.
So it wasn't until high school?
It was not until high school. Well, and I was like a junior.
Wow.
There was nothing. If someone had proof of something different, I wouldn't believe them. Because I do not remember a single thing up until
Were you
then.
Separated boys, girls, or was it all one cohort?
I think it was all one cohort.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
it was all
at least
of us
y'all were together. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember specifically... I was already having sex when she said that, which is why it like sticks out to me so much. So it's just wild. And there's so much that goes into, I guess, really good comprehensive sex education. One, there should be education around like, if you're queer, what does sex look like for you? Cause it's not just penis and vagina. And something, that my clients probably hear me say a lot, and I say a lot, is like the language around this. A lot of my clients, like particularly like straight couples, when they say sex, I know they mean intercourse. Like, oh,
Of
we
course.
haven't had sex in a month.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? I will ask what they mean, but I already kind of know what they mean. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like intercourse? Like, yeah, intercourse. Because if they have, let's say, oral sex 2 weeks ago, they're not
Doesn't
counting
count.
that as right. But the language I use is like, I don't even use the word foreplay anymore. I'm like, maybe foreplay is like kissing. Okay, maybe I would categorize that. But like anything involving like genitals, like oral sex, all of that is sex. And then there's intercourse. That's how I say it. So they're like, foreplay. I'm like, you mean sex? You mean oral sex? You mean like, what do you really mean?
Got it. Okay.
Because people do say foreplay and they mean everything but intercourse. And then
Yes.
once you have intercourse, now you're having sex.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't like that. I'm like, the whole experience can be a sexual experience. So anyways, I'm just giving my distinction on.
I love that you point that out, because there's a ton of queer experiences where we will have a sexual experience with someone who identifies as straight, and they completely discount the experience because there is no sexual penetration, there's no intercourse
Yes.
at all. So to them, you didn't have sex. But in the queer community, to that queer person, that could have easily been like the most intimate thing that they would ever do. So yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Absolutely. And what I think about when you say that is I've worked with a lot of male clients that have erectile dysfunction.
Mhm.
And they'll call it erectile dysfunction. I like to categorize it as more of a disappointment and not a dysfunction. And I want to explain like what I mean by that. Like, I think erectile dysfunction is real, and especially when there's something medical going on,
Mhm.
right? Like if you have like diabetes and there's issues like with your nerve endings and it's making it hard to have an erection, or if there's like a tear in your tissue that leads blood that gives you an erection. There's like issues like that, like erectile dysfunction can be real. Usually what I see in my office is a man will have an erectile disappointment one time, and it freaks them out so much that every time they have sex after, they psych themselves out.
Oh,
They go
yeah.
in going, oh my God, now I'm worried because like I gotta be hard. And so I'm gonna like really focus on like having an erection. And it creates so much anxiety that anxiety ends up being the block that keeps them from having an erection. And then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then it happens again. And so then it's like, I have a problem, I have erectile dysfunction. And I always have to question, is it really a dysfunction, or was it like you got disappointed one time and because sex is only intercourse, you're a failure because you couldn't get hard? That's usually how they interpret it. A lot of men will interpret it that way. Like, I'm not doing my job. Literally, they will say, I'm not doing my job because I couldn't be hard.
No, poor guy.
It's like, it's
your job
awful.
is to get her off, bro. Like, that's really all.
Like it's awful. And I'm like, you can have so much pleasure without an erection.
Yeah.
And usually the way I get them to get out of that like anxiety cycle is I will kind of challenge them, like, I want you to have sex and I don't want you to even want to have an erection. Like, I want you to think about it so little that you're focused on the other parts of your body that are enjoyable, and you're focused on your partner's body and what's enjoyable to them. And I guarantee you, if you get in that that headspace, your erection will come naturally.
I like that.
And it does happen.
Okay, good.
It'll come back naturally because they're not thinking about it so much.
No, yeah, I love that, because there's been a quote that's always stuck with me when it comes to happiness. Sorry about the weird tangent quote, but the quote is, happiness is much like an orgasm. You know, if you think about it too much, it goes away.
Yes.
Type thing. So I kind of attribute it same thing to like you're just having your body perform. If you're overthinking about it, it doesn't always happen. Because I've found that with an orgasm. If you're thinking about trying to get there and that's all you're thinking about, a lot of times it doesn't happen as naturally as if you just focused on the pleasure your body's having, and then it just happens really nicely, organically.
One thing I did want to say is that men can have an orgasm even if they don't have an erection.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I always like to give that little tidbit education that you can have an orgasm, you can come even if you're not hard.
And without their prostate being, I'm assuming, because I've seen that before, like in certain videos where mostly in gay sex videos where the bottom is orgasming at the same, so he's obviously ejaculating at the
Mm-hmm.
and he's getting penetrated. And I don't think he's hard from my thoughts and views. But even without his prostate being stimulated, you're saying that they can still
Mm-hmm.
have an orgasm
Yeah.
without being hard. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
No.
and the focus on orgasm, like even for women, it does create some anxiety. Like I've heard before, like if you're, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like if your partner is giving you oral sex,
Mhm.
I heard a lot of what from my clients at least that if they feel like they're taking too long to have an orgasm, they'll start to kind of psych themselves out.
Yes.
Like it's taking too long. They're having to work too hard. I need to like hurry up and get. As soon as you start thinking that way, it's like another block. Like instead of just enjoying the ride and like letting it feel good, it just creates so much anxiety, and then it's not the best experience anymore.
Yeah, because for some reason I feel like men get berated if they come too quickly, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
berated, but they're not
Like
supposed
it's
to.
looked down
Yeah, there
upon.
you go. If
Yeah,
they come too
yeah,
quickly. And on the flip side, women are looked down upon if they don't come quickly enough, right?
yeah.
If you're putting if you're as a partner putting work down there and it takes a really long time, the person down there, um I don't know, if as a woman you have a fear of them complaining
Yes,
almost.
yes.
Yeah. So I can understand that, cuz especially when I was younger and I was still figuring things out, it took forever for me.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously my partner, we were both new. We were both figuring the women's body and each other's body out at the same time. So yeah, there were a lot of fumbles. There were a lot of things that we had to self discover. There was nobody kind of guiding us. So yeah, I remember I can very much relate to any woman who's like, yeah, I will psych myself out because it's just taking longer than it should be, right? And I
Yeah.
don't want to keep them down there. I'm sure their jaw hurts or whatever it is.
You always think of something. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That's a really good, interesting point. Like women worry to take too long, men worry that they're going to come too fast. And what's so funny, and this is why education is so important. I've heard this, and I don't think this was like one of my clients, but I think I probably heard this story through a colleague. Um, but they had a client who was like, I had premature ejaculation, and in the DSM, like the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, which we use as therapists, there is a diagnosis of premature ejaculation, but it's like I'm not getting I probably will not get the numbers exactly right, but it's categorized like 0 to 10 seconds, 10 to 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds. Like we're talking like a very small amount of time. And
Yeah.
then, you come and then it could be premature ejaculation. But I think this colleague had a client who was like, I had premature ejaculation. And so he asked, of course, like, well, how long are you lasting
Yeah.
before you finish? I think his answer was like 10 minutes. And it was like,
That
you
sounds
don't have,
about,
yeah, you don't have
that's
premature ejaculation.
about
Like, you're
right.
just fine. You're just
Yeah.
fine. The average is even shorter than that. And so, like, I always think about that example because the education is so important because without it, people will stress about things that are not problematic. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because there's just this,
Well, you should be having sex from like dusk till dawn.
it's all
And
the shoulds. Yeah, it should be lasting hours. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, can you imagine? So it's all these shoulds. It's all the
Yeah.
shoulds. It should be this way, but I'm not doing it that way. So there's something wrong.
Mm.
And then, they end up being a client of mine. And it's like having to normalize there actually is nothing wrong.
Ah,
Right?
right.
Can
Yeah.
can you just focus on what actually feels good and just like let it feel good?
Wraps back to education. I wanna bring it back a little bit to the sex education, because my sex education was very. I only had it, if I can remember, once, maybe twice. I might have had it twice. But my brain goes back to, I want to say, either third or fourth grade is when I had my sex education. And it really wasn't a sex education; it was reproduction
Yeah.
education, or really puberty education. They didn't even go into reproduction. They mostly went into what happens to your body when you get your period and things like that. And they separated us boys and girls, right? And as I heard a comedian say that they're basically, this was a queer comedian, say that there's such a good joke there because the fact that they separated us boys and girls and then taught us about the reproductive organs of your gender. I'm sorry, that to me is a little bit of a queer sex education in the sense, like, we're not teaching kids, about the other person's bodies and their needs. And God forbid you even mention a clitoris, because I don't think there are any sex education where a
Oh,
clitoris is where anyone talks about pleasure.
yeah. No, it's not pleasure based at
Mhm.
all. It's
Mhm.
like a few little things sprinkled in. Here's how it looks, or here's how it should look, and like that's it, right?
Yes.
We do
Yes.
not talk about pleasure at all. And it just when I think if I'm like looping it back into the impact on mental health, all of these shoulds and assumptions and the way things should look give people so much depression and anxiety, so much. And imagine if you're having sex in a way that is against what it should be. Imagine the impact that's going to have on your life outside of sex, too. Like, if that area of your life is just so clouded with doom, I can't imagine you're going to feel like a whole person
Oh no, I mean
walking through the rest of your life.
it's so interesting because when you're getting your sex education in high school, in those grammar years, even in college, like your mind is on sex so
Yes.
much, but you don't have the only references you have are either in the porn industry or what you see in the media and the movies, what as far as like, the men should be pursuing as many women as possible and they should be
Mhm.
having as much sex as possible and they should be lasting hours and hours and hours and be able to always, she should it's his job to provide her with an orgasm, and that's his goal. And then
Yeah.
the woman is, it seems like we're brought up to not have any sex at all. Like, you should never have sex before marriage. The only sex you should be having is to procreate when you with your husband. And then on top of that, like, we're not taught as women what to expect in the bedroom, even by our peers. Like, that's not even
No, and
something
it's so
we discuss.
intimidating. When
Yes.
you first start having sex, it's so intimidating because you don't know what you're doing.
No.
You don't know what you're
At
doing.
all.
There's no one to like accurately walk you through it.
Yes.
And to me, that's also really scary. Um, because another piece of sex education, and I talk about this a lot with clients too, especially like the couples I work with. It's so easy to have consent violations when you don't know what you're doing and you
Definitely.
don't know what you're allowed to say yes or no to or what you should. It's all these shoulds. And so we kind of like freeze up and there's like all these consent violations that could be happening in your relationship and you don't even have the language to know that. And I think that happens especially to young people,
Oh,
minors. They're like the most
definitely.
vulnerable population and things will happen and they have no idea what is right, what is wrong, what am I allowed to like what can my boundaries even be, you know? And I think that has to be a part of sex education too, but we can't teach that if we're not talking about it.
Agreed.
Right? That's the
Agreed.
really shitty part. And I've had couples where they've had plenty of consent violations in the past and maybe they're still happening now. And there's a lot of it's a big gray area. Consent is not just yes, no, black and white.
Yes.
It
That's one
is
thing I'm learning.
very complex. It is very complex. Um, and yeah, I just think there's so much there that we're not talking about, we're not teaching, and it is impacting our health mentally, but physically too.
Oh yeah.
You know, when like if sex is only penis and vagina intercourse, people will think they don't need protection any other kind of way, and that's like the best way to spread STDs.
Yeah. I'll give you that. All
Mhm.
day, every day. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it it's so interesting how so much of the protection and so much of the non-pregnancy, like the ability to prevent pregnancy, is on the responsibility, or it seems like on the woman, to make sure that she's protected and she's not going to contract any of these things. And it's very rarely, I mean, obviously guys are told that they should wrap up, but that's kind of where that stops.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would attribute that to purity culture if we want to get like way back into it. Like, um, there is this myth, like the myth of the hymen. And
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, like if your hymen is intact, like it means that you're still a virgin. The hymen, like, okay, I just like want to laugh because I think it's like the stupidest thing. Because there's like these checks, like we'll check the female, and if her hymen is still intact, even if like you're a little bit older when your hymen is broken, it could be from, you know,
Oh,
horseback riding
yeah, it
or
could
like
be.
contact sport, like whatever. Um, but purity culture is all about the woman being pure.
Yeah.
And like these checks are so violating and also like kind of disgusting because like there's no way to check if men are pure. It
Yeah,
is all about the
right?
woman. And, you know, my overall point with purity culture just meaning at one point in time women were quite literally worth more if they were pure. And
Interesting.
I think we bring that into today. Like you're worth more if you're pure at the time of marriage. I don't think men really get that message the way that girls and women do.
Oh, no, not at all. And that kind of correlates also to the porn industry. You're worth way more if these are your first scenes. If you're,
Yes.
this is the first
If
time
you're a
we've seen your
virgin,
face. If
if
you're, yep,
yes,
yep.
yes.
Versus if you've been in the industry for a really long time, then obviously you're not going to get paid the same as you would when you first came, into the industry. So I could see that. And listeners, write in. If you're a doctor, if you're in the medical field, can you explain a little bit as far as like the hymen goes? Because I just had my wellness checkup with my doctor. Me and my wife went together for the first time as a married couple, so that was nice. I'm having someone else in the waiting room, giving opinions on my health, because she's my wife. But anyway, she asked us, because we're a lesbian couple, if my partner's hymen had been broken, so that way she knew as far as when the pap smear was going to happen, what size speculum to use or how careful to be. So now I'm curious. Now I'm really curious that we have that
Interesting.
brought up in this
Yeah.
conversation. So yeah, write in, doctors, please, medical professionals. I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, now I want to go look more into this because I do know about it, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I should probably research this a bit more. But I think like, going back to education and kind of the impact it has on us, I think a lot of education is also rooted in like everyone has sex and everyone enjoys sex. And I don't think that's necessarily true either.
True, yeah.
And I'm kind of going into asexuality
Yes.
and people who are asexual because talking with the sex positivity movement, I think people can definitely misconstrue what sex positivity is because they think it means like everyone should be promiscuous, like everyone like pro casual sex. We should be promiscuous, we should be out there, we should be open. That's not really what it's about. It's about empowering you and however is true and authentic to you. And the same goes for asexuality. And it's a spectrum like anything else. Like some asexual people, they may just not experience sexual attraction to anyone, but maybe they still find pleasure in sex and want to have it. And then you've got some people who don't want to have sex at all.
Asexual repulsive.
Yeah, they could be repulsed by it. And those identities are true and valid and allowed, and you can have great relationships even if you don't have sex at all.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up because one of the things when I was looking at the rebuttals as far as the sex positive movement and kind of what our clapbacks are or what people are saying why they wouldn't want to be a part of our movement, a lot of it was the asexual community was saying how they just don't feel representative or they don't feel represented in the sex positivity movement because it inherently has this very promiscuous kind of outlook to it. Whereas the asexual community, I mean, that's not part of their lifestyle typically, or it's not a major part of their lifestyle typically. So it's hard for them to want to join or say hurrah, which, just like Lindsay said, we're here to say, the absence of sex is very much part of the individual as they want to have whatever type of sex you would like.
Yeah, it's whatever your preference is. It's what feels right for you. And in my work as a sex therapist and a couples therapist, anyone listening who would want to be a client one day, and this is even for all my current clients, like when you come to work with me or any sex therapist, I cannot promise that I'm going to help y'all have more sex because I think it's way more complex than that, right?
Oh,
If
okay.
libidos are mismatched, one
Yes.
partner wants to have more sex than the other. I say it's more complex because let's say that's the case where a couple comes in and they're not having sex a lot or as much as one partner would want. Um, if one of the partner starts to realize that they are asexual and maybe have never liked sex and maybe don't want to have sex anymore, I'm not going to push against that and say, well,
Good.
you're married, you got to have. No, it's like whatever is true to you, we're going to have to figure out what that means for y'all in your relationship. It could mean the end of the relationship. It could mean opening the relationship. It could, I mean, there's like a few options here, but I'm never going to tell you what to do one way or the other. And so I always want people to know that because I think when you come and see a sex therapist, it's very intimidating because I think people assume I'm going to be in the role of like, yeah, let's get your libido higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot promise that. And
Okay.
I'm not going to make that true if you're not ready for that, if you
Mhm.
don't want that. If you do want a higher libido and there's blocks getting in the way, that's what I'm going to help you process. But, I can't really guarantee. And so I kind of like to set that expectation up front because, like, I'm not trying to disappoint anyone. But as soon as you start pushing someone,
This is about your
it's
exploration.
about,
Yeah.
it's like as soon as you start pushing someone and they feel that pressure, it's going to make them back off even more.
Fair. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's just a really important distinction to make.
Okay. Okay. I like that. On the topic of sex education, I do want to kind of bring up the your professional opinion on what you think about the fact that most of the sex education here in the US is rooted in abstinence and how we should be abstaining from sex, and the approach that they do this for is mostly for the fact that we need to be avoiding teen pregnancy, we need to be avoiding diseases, we need to be avoiding any type of assault or anything like that to our kids, or things like that, which I can understand. I get that thinking of it, but I'm curious as far as like what the data shows or what.
Yeah. So the data shows abstinence only states have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. It does
Interesting.
not work. It does not work. Those places that are doing a better job of comprehensive sex education have less teen pregnancy than we do in Texas. So one, the numbers in the research show this isn't working. So that's number one.
Okay.
I think, at least here, I think there's a religious component to this. And I'm not trying to, anyone listening who is religious, I am not trying to offend you at all. I'm not like necessarily like anti-religion because I think religion and faith and spirituality like have its place, but they do tend to be as a whole relatively sex negative.
Yeah, until marriage, definitely.
Yeah. So I think if I were to boil it down, the abstinence only like message primarily being through the church, I think it boils down to control.
Okay.
Like, we know y'all are probably going to have sex anyways, but if we can make you feel bad enough about it, we can control you more. Like, you're more vulnerable to the control that maybe the church wants to have as far as like lining its people up and like having them align with the beliefs that the church has. So that's probably a complex conversation. And I don't necessarily mean like the person at your individual church is trying to control you. I'm talking about the institution as a whole. If you go down to it, I think it's a control thing.
Okay. Stay
Yeah.
tuned, guys. We'll do a whole episode on abstinence and
Yes.
sex education. That's interesting. Yeah, during the research, I did find out that it wasn't until, which I think is freaking crazy, that it wasn't until May of 2021 that the Real Education and Access for a Healthy Youth Act, or REA, I think is how that acronym goes, introduced a federal grant aimed to encompass truthful, non-judgmental, and inclusive sex education for youth, to where they teach people to have an open conversation about healthy relationships, especially as starting point for like the younger kids, just teaching them healthy relationships, teaching them boundaries, teaching them body autonomy, teaching them the ability to correctly name the parts of their bodies without nicknames, and also obviously inclusive education for members of the queer community. And the fact that that literally just happened
2 years ago is crazy. And it'll take, like, for that to even be enforced or go into effect, I mean, it's going to take years and years. It's just going to take forever. And, like, when I think about like truthful sex education and like talking about purity culture and how girls and women really feel that. I have seen or heard like examples in school using duct tape as an example. Like you see the duct tape is sticky, right? Because it's never been used.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it's
Go
never
ahead.
been used. But if you keep using it over and over, it's not sticky anymore. AKA, if you fuck too many times, you're going to be loose. Well, who are you saying that to? You're saying it to the people who have a vagina
Exactly,
in the room. You're
yeah.
not like that doesn't apply to men. Men can't be loose, but women, your vagina can be loose, and you better watch that. Which is like not fucking true at all. Like the science shows you don't just get looser the more you have sex. That makes no sense at all. But it's like interesting because like men don't want a woman who is loose, but will get mad if they're rejected. So it's like, which one, like, do you want every girl you meet to sleep with you? Or do you want them to not be loose? You like, I don't know. It's just such an interesting concept. So when I think about that example, I'm like, that is specifically for girls.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's crazy that we're having this recording this now, but I literally listened to one of my favorite podcasts where they were talking, one of the girls who is from Canada, so not even US, but she grew up in a very religious town, and her gym teacher also gave the sex ed talk, right? And they passed around the apple. Obviously it was boys and girls, so this was just the girls. They passed around an apple and they had them all take a bite of the apple, right? And by the end, they were like, each bite represented a partner, right? So each time that you bite an apple, that's the time that you had sex. And then by the time you get to the end, it's just that core, right? And they're like, and now look at this. Would anyone, he holds up the apple stem, would anyone want to marry this? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that happens?
What the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Like-
I would be I don't have kids, but if I had a kid and they came home and said, we did like the apple exercise, I would be storming up. Like, you best believe I would be storming up to that school.
Yeah, okay. So one thing before we log off, I did want to just kind of go into the impacts of the sex positive movement. When I was looking it up, I was seeing a lot of clapbacks, a lot of people who were, well, the sex positive movement is bad because of this. And one of the main things that I took away on it is that a lot of people argue that the movement overlooks the ways in which sex can be exploitative or harmful, especially when you come to the commodification of sex, which is obviously a controversial topic and kind of is how we got brought up, right? The porn is good versus porn is not, which we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your perspective is as far as like the exploitation goes.
Yeah, I think sex can totally be exploited, which is problematic.
Yes.
And that's one of the principles I think is important to sexual health, to the sex positive movement, is that we're safe.
Yes.
And that there's consent and that there's honesty and there's shared values. You're not being exploited. Taking all the necessary precautions to avoid like STDs, STI, unwanted pregnancy, right? So these are like all the principles that always have to be at the core. And exploitation happens in many ways. And when I think about porn, for example, I think a way that it can be exploitive is like, for example, if someone is on OnlyFans and they're making money on OnlyFans, they've got their content, all great, right? If someone steals their content and posts it on Pornhub and they start making their own money and getting their own views for this material, that is exploitation, and it's also like theft of property, right?
Oh, of course, definitely.
And you'll hear it all the time, like if that happened to someone on OnlyFans and they took like legal action, let's say.
Good. Yeah.
Let's say that happens. You will hear this rebuttal even against them, like, well, you put it on the internet, this is just what happens. And that is very much related to like, if you were raped, but you were wearing that outfit, like, weren't you kind of asking for it? It like very much reminds me of that, where it's like, that is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
If I'm on OnlyFans and the only people who can see my content are those who are paying for it, and you steal it and you post it somewhere else, and now all these people who I didn't consent to seeing my stuff can now see it, that is a consent violation. That is exploitation. Like, do you get what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it can happen so easily.
No,
And
this is my art. I
yes.
charge for people to see my art, and if someone decides to steal it, is no different than someone stealing from an artist or any other.
Yeah. And
it's-
exploitation, I think, with the internet happens so much more
oh,
now.
definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a valid criticism or clapback, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
Because people should be concerned about that. You know,
Agreed.
like sex positivity doesn't mean that everyone is just open and careless. Like, there is a lot of care that should be going into being sex positive,
Okay.
is how I would say it.
I like that. And then the second rebuttal that I saw pretty frequently was that although the movement in general does preach cultural diversity, it also unfortunately gets criticized for the lack of inclusivity, as the movement's largely made up of white, middle class, cisgendered activists who are also able-bodied as well.
Yeah.
So
that is such a valid criticism.
Okay.
I 100% agree. Like,
Okay.
I think we should always be looking at that. I mean, look, I'm a perfect example. Like, I'm like middle class, cisgender, white woman. Like, I'm the perfect example of someone who easily could be doing things that make this worse, even within my advocacy, because I don't know everything. Like, kind of like I said earlier, like when you're really being an advocate, you're listening to those voices and these minority groups. And if you're involved in, like, I'll bring up like porn industry, and you want to do a really good job of it, you're going to be including disabled actors, actors of color, Black actors, trans actors. I mean, you're going to be including a diverse group of people, but not only including them, you're going to be listening to them. You can't just include them. Like, you can't just bring them in and they're going to do what you say. You have to be listening to them and their life experience and the feedback they're giving you. Because, like, when I think about, let's say, a Black person, I don't know their experience, and there's no way that I could know.
Of course, yeah.
And, like, who am I to not believe them? That's how I view it, is like, who am I to not believe you? What you tell me, I'm going to believe you. And that's what I'm going to help you. That's what I'm going to follow you in. Right. So when I think about that kind of criticism, I think it's true.
Okay. As
Yeah,
a therapist, are you constantly trying to learn from your clients who are in the minority categories?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I know I'm like using Black people as like an example, and I've done that a few times today. But I do have Black clients, but a lot of Black clients want a Black therapist.
Of course, yes.
And I totally get that. Like, I would never, if I had a Black client tell me this isn't working out, I would prefer a Black therapist, I would never be offended by that.
Okay.
I would be like, I totally get it, because you're going to have this like shared life experience already. Yes. And that's going to help in the rapport that you have with your therapist. And if that's going to make your therapy better and more effective, like, absolutely you should do that. And I don't think there's enough Black therapists. I think there's a huge barrier there that keeps them from getting into this profession. And even when they are in this profession, a lot of times they're not taken as seriously.
Oh,
that's a huge bummer. And so there's not enough of them.
No, I can relate to the consumer who is trying to find someone who's more like-minded like them, because I recently actually reached out for therapy. So I was on the BetterHelp Regain website, and I was searching through, and they match them up for you, so you can kind of put in what you prefer.
Yeah.
And I sure do. For the most part, I will check that I would prefer, which almost never happens, actually has yet to happen. I would prefer a queer therapist.
Yeah.
Just because they very much have similar experiences that I've gone through. They kind of understand that a little bit better. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I think it's totally valid, and I think consumers and clients deserve that. And if there's ever a problem where, you're not able to find a queer therapist that's like in your area, you're not asking for too much. We as a profession are not providing a diverse enough pool of therapists, right? So I think it really starts there, and I can go off on a whole tangent on that. But I think about that rebuttal being so valid and something that we should always be looking at.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to because we already covered the asexuality, which is also another rebuttal, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I wanted to cover what other people say as far as the reasons we shouldn't be sex positive, which is still kind of tying back to we all should still be sex positive. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, my opinion as
Okay.
well.
All right. Anything you'd like to bring up before we close out?
The last thing I want to bring up before we close out, I'm going to go back to consent violations really quickly.
Okay. Yes.
When I am helping my clients be sex positive and I'm empowering them to own their sexuality and to know what they find pleasurable and to not feel any shame about that. Part of being sex positive is being able to like control yourself and regulate yourself, even if you don't have a willing partner. And what I'm really talking, I'm going to give like a pretty blanket example, but like if I have a certain kind of kink and my husband is not interested in that, or he's not ready for that, or it's just like, no, I then have the responsibility of regulating myself. Like I can't get mad at him. I can't like coercion happens so easily where our partner says no to us and we guilt trip them so much to the point where they just like cave and give in.
Yeah.
That's not consent.
Okay.
That's cool. I would not consider that consent. I would
Good.
consider that like I've been beaten down enough that I'll just like give in and like I'm tired of you being on my ass about it, so I'll do
No,
it.
that very much tributes to a lot of the what I've hear a lot of women say, where I was tired of hearing him ask about it, so I just
So I'm
let
just
him
gonna
have it.
cave in. I'll just get it over with. Jesus, you know,
Yeah,
it's
I'll
like,
just get it over
whoa,
with.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's
And
the
so
way.
that is not consent. And talk about impacting your mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a depressing place to be in, where if you're in any kind of dynamic where you feel like you're constantly being coerced, your voice is being taken away, your consent is being taken away, and that's going to impact your health. It's not going to feel good. And so I'm always empowering my clients too, like, part of owning your sexuality is not making demands. You cannot demand someone do what you want to do.
Okay.
You're going to have to figure that. You're going to have to figure out yourself, like, what this means for you. How are you expressing your, like, what is the emotional tie to what you like? And can you help your partner understand that? And those are like the conversations I try to help navigate in my office. But that's the best way to handle it. And like, if I'm going back to, you know, like male-female relationship where instead of course, like let's just say you want to have sex and wife says no, you know, go jack off. I'm sorry, but it's like if you want a sexual release and your partner is saying no, go handle yourself.
Yeah.
And if you feel like that's happening all the time, there's probably a really big emotional conversation to have about it, and I can help you with that. But what I'm never going to be okay with is like the coercion, the guilt tripping, the getting mad, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of conversation to be had around that. So that's kind of what I want to close it at, especially the tie into mental health. You don't need to coerce. I'm trying to empower you to own your sexuality. Part of owning it is being respectful of other people's boundaries and preferences.
I completely agree with that, and I'm glad we're putting that message out, because I sure did listen to a recent message of Morgan and Paul, I think is their YouTube channel, where they had sex tips that they were giving, and obviously they're a couple that doesn't believe in masturbation or any of the in porn or any of those things. They think you should, you and your partner wait till marriage, so that type of sphere. And I do remember seeing a very uncomfortable conversation where she was very aware that she was telling him no and he wasn't going to get sex that night, and you could see the emotional toll it took on him, even in the background when they're reminiscing on a past experience, and how you can see how hurt he felt, on how where he felt like he was owed sex almost. And he even said the words, I wish that, whenever you felt like you didn't want to have sex and we're fighting, and obviously you're not in the mood because we're fighting, that you would just, maybe turn to your partner and be like, you know what, we're not going to agree on this issue that we're having, on this argument we're having, but let's go ahead and have sex. And when I heard that, it literally just, everything in me as a woman was just like, no.
Oh, it's so concerning. It's
so
so concerning. And I just hate that.
Yeah.
I just hate that.
So no, I'm glad we're putting it out there that, you're allowed to have your own desires. And if two people don't necessarily match up, there's a deeper conversation that needs to be had at that point. And I agree with that very much. So
absolutely. Okay. Well, this was a good conversation. I feel like there's there's so much in this context,
Oh,
and I
we could
know
keep
me. I
going,
know
guys.
me being a therapist, I could talk about it for days. But hey, thank you guys so much for listening, and next episode we will be talking about porn and ethical porn, specifically.
Yes.
And we will have a guest on our
we'll have
episode
a surprise
as well.
guest, guys. So tune in. Yeah, enjoy our
Yeah,
next
tune
episode.
in and see who we're gonna have. And remember to this is Sex Positivity Unfiltered. Remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.